Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Time for the Spookshow Rewind, where we take a trip back through the archives and relive some of the classic moments of
the All-American Spook Show podcast.
What's old is new again. Here we go. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of the All-American Spook Show Horror Podcast. I'm Josh. I'm joined here with Donny.
Hey.
And the Professor Smoke. Up. And we're here for our first ever Spook Show Rewind episode, where we're literally going to go back to the very beginning of the All-American Spook Show Horror Podcast. We're going to start here with episode 1, and we're going to talk about Reanimator from 1985. Now, the point of all this is not only to maybe add a few tidbits of information that we didn't have the first time around, but to get Donnie's thoughts on it, his star rating, get his connections from the crypt, which, obviously he wasn't around to do back then. And we didn't do the Gore Score back then either, so we'll get Professor to give his Gore Score, or, his, sometimes on these older movies, he'll refer back to one that the late great Chaz Balin did, back in the day. So that's what's kind of coming up in this episode, and that's the whole thought process behind it. Also, we encourage you to go back in the archives all the way back to episode 1 and listen to that one, because really that's where you're going to get your deep dive. And plus you're going to hear some of the funnier moments of the beginnings of the Spook Show. Like, for instance, it's been brought up a number of times since then. Will had to do that episode. He had to record it in his car. And at some point, like, his battery started dying, so like he had to cut his car on or something. And then you could hear like the ding, 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 like the whole thing. It's all there, like him opening up the door and closing it and everything. It's all in that episode. And that's also where the phrase, basically, fuck it, it was 1985. That's where it started. All the way back to where we couldn't explain what the hell certain parts of this movie were trying to do. Was it was 1985. So, if you've ever heard us say that, that's where it came from, all the way back in episode 1, which we started in October of 2018. It's hard to believe it's been that long. So that's where this is the one that began it all. So we'll go back through on our scores, once Donnie gives his star rating. That way you can, we're not necessarily heavily influencing his, although I'd be shocked if his score is as high as a couple of ours were, but we'll see when we get there here in a brief few moments. But the original episode 1, I just looked, came out all the way back October 18th, 2018. So it's been well over 3 years since that episode came out. It's just hard to believe for me. But before we get any deeper, I'll go ahead and toss the usual information. You can contact us the old email way through allamericanspookshow@gmail.com. Of course, you can find us on Twitter. We are at AA Spookshow. You should easily be able to track us down on Instagram, Facebook, the Slasher app, TikTok by searching for All American Spook Show. We have our YouTube page where every Wednesday we do a live show called Deadline Horror News Live, usually 9 p.m. East, give or take a few minutes, over on our YouTube channel. Of course, we have Patreon, patreon.com/AA Spook Show, where you can become a patron over there. Levels starting at $1, $3 on up. There you get early access to episodes. You get to vote on our monthly Patreon polls for a movie that we're going to watch the following month. We have video minisodes where those come out every Tuesday, and the feature there is the Library of the Professor, where Smoke will take something from his library and talk about it. So that's always a fun time. Every once in a while, he's not there, so we have to do the Library of Josh and Donny. That's happened a couple of times. So it's always a fun time over there. So you just need to become a patron to check all that out. Of course, we have our TeePublic page where you can get logoed merchandise, some other cool designs that we've put up over there. They make shirts and mugs and face masks and all kinds of other random things. all the links to all these things that I just talked about should be down in our Linktree link down in the show notes. So just go down there, click on that, and you should see all the links right there in front of you to find everything you want to find. So I guess in the spirit of how we normally do things, I'll go ahead and toss the trailer for Reanimator.
You're insane! Now what happened? I had to kill him! He's dead? Not anymore.
Herbert West brought a lot of dead people back to life, and not one of them showed any appreciation. H.P. Lovecraft's classic tale of horror, Reanimator.
Mr. West. You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head get a job in a sideshow?
It will scare you to pieces.
All right, so there you go. There's the trailer for that to set it up. So, I guess Donnie, you know, we're kind of going by the familiar format, but we're mixing it up a little bit here.
Yeah.
With this movie, Reanimator, now you watching it for this? Was this the first time you watched it?
No, I had seen this at least twice. Like I can't recall the first time I watched it, but you know, it just gets better with every viewing. You know, it does.
I agree. I agree. I've seen it a number of times, and I agree. Like every time you watch it, you pick something new out, and you just, you can just continue to enjoy it. In my opinion.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I guess with that, what were your initial thoughts on it, man? Like, you know, back maybe not necessarily the first time you watched it because you can't really remember the first time, but like maybe your early thoughts and what did you think about it this time around? You know, without giving away your star rating, we'll save that here for a little bit.
Yeah, like, you know, I can't remember. You know, you just mentioned it. I can't really recall the first time I watched it. I know I watched it at least a couple of times in college, at least once more. But you know, it's just this is really what comes. You know, when you think of like the pinnacle of horror comedy, you know, Reanimator is what you think of.
Yeah.
Basically, is the benchmark. You know, classic '80s horror. You know, and really like there are movies that. Well, I'll just say what it is. It's just really witty and entertaining throughout. There's not really any lull periods, and that cannot be said for not so much a lot of horror movies, but horror comedies. Usually, there's a few dead spots, where shit just doesn't hit all the time. But this, the jokes are still relevant. They still make you laugh, and it's just, the practical effects, everything is just on point. Just through, from start to finish.
Now, Smoke, I know you agree with pretty much everything he just said. Now, we've already said our piece on this, a few years ago, but did you have anything you wanted to add about it, or like have you watched it again since then that you recall or anything?
Oh yeah, because it's been how many? Has it been 3 years now?
Yeah, like I said, that was October of 2018, so it's been over.
Yeah.
It's been over 3 years, yeah.
Like I said, we're not talking about necessarily our ratings on it yet here, but but judging for when we do mention what ours was, I have definitely seen it since the last time we watched it, at least once. I might have seen it again twice. I really can't put a number on how many times I've seen this movie since I first saw it back in '86 or so, I guess, when it first. I don't know if I saw it in '85 or '86 on VHS, whatever. Rented it. I don't know what the number is on it, but yeah, I definitely have seen it at least once since the last time we watched it. It's one that I could just watch over and over again.
It seems like I've seen some like bits and pieces of it since then, but I don't think I've sat down and watched it from beginning to end since we watched it then.
Yeah, it's how many times have you seen it? You had seen it though before that, right?
Oh yeah. I've seen this thing, golly, at least 3 to 5 times or so, man. Over the years, it's been a lot.
Yeah, it's about the same.
Yeah.
It falls in that category with like Evil Dead films and Romero's zombie movies and everything. It's horror. It's it's become canon, for not canon films, but
Yeah,
iconic horror films, of those iconic horror films outside of the usual slasher genres. Everybody knows Freddy and Jason and all that stuff, but not necessarily everybody knows Reanimator unless you're a horror fan or you just came across it.
I'll give out some general information here, and then a little bit of the updated ratings, since it has been over 3 years since we talked about it. Not our ratings, but critics' ratings and stuff. It was released in the U.S. on May 24th, 1985. But it really didn't. That must have been at one small thing or something, because it says Doylestown, Pennsylvania. But as far as wide, I guess it came out October 18th, 1985, here in the United States. It's actually unrated. I'm guessing that it didn't get an MPAA rating, at least as far as according to IMDb here. I'm not seeing one. But the total runtime is 1 hour and 44 minutes. But this movie definitely doesn't feel like an hour and 44 minutes to me. I mean, it's so entertaining. Like Donnie said, it keeps your attention. Like it doesn't drag. So an hour and 44 actually, in some ways, doesn't feel long enough for this movie.
No.
You enjoy it so much when you're sitting there watching it. It was directed by Stuart Gordon, and it stars Jeffrey Combs, Bruce Abbott, Barbara Crampton, and a number of other people like David Gale, Robert Sampson. But those are your main players right there. Jeffrey Combs is Herbert West, Bruce Abbott is Dan Kane, and then Barbara Crampton is Megan Halsey. And then, of course, David Gale is Dr. Carl Hill. A hell of a performance. And we mentioned in that episode, he basically, from what we saw or read or something, he basically lost his wife because of this role.
Yeah.
Because of the whole, head going, the whole head giving head bit.
Going downtown.
Yeah. Pretty much ruined this guy, as far as his marriage is concerned. On the poster, I love this. I just saw it and I thought I'd mention it real quick. The tagline on there, Herbert West has a good head on his shoulders and another one on his desk. Another iconic poster, too, of him sitting there with the vial in his hand glowing green, and you see the doctor's head on the desk looking up at him and everything. Iconic poster for sure. But the more recent rating updates, I'll give you that. IMDb now has a 7.2 out of 10 star rating, and on Metacritic the meta score is 73. It said that their scale's up to 100, so that's pretty high. Even more impressive over on Rotten Tomatoes. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there's even more critic reviews since the last time we talked about it. This thing is certified fresh, 94% on the tomato meter, and that's out of 62 reviews. So it's not like 6 guys gave it a great rating. I mean, that's very impressive for any horror movie. I'll be honest with you. It's very impressive. 94% on the tomato meter. And even the audience score is very high. It's not as high as that, but it's 82%. So that's kind of what you're dealing with this movie. I mean, I think anyone that watches this appreciates it for what it is. It's a horror classic at this point. Like Donnie mentioned, it's one of the benchmarks of horror comedies. Right up there with, if not higher than, say, like The Return of the Living Dead and a handful of others. Some we've talked about on the show and some we haven't, but this ranks pretty high. And I think anyone that has ever, enjoys horror and has sit down and watches this has enjoyed this movie. There's no doubt about that. But like we said, if you want to hear a much more deeper dive on where we go through the plot of the movie and give our feelings and some of the background information and all that, go back all the way back to episode 1 in the archives and listen to that.
It's refreshment time, and our refreshment stand is loaded with good things to eat. There's crispy, crunchy popcorn and hot, delicious buttered popcorn, lots of candy, and frosty, refreshing cold drinks. Why not treat yourself at the refreshment center now?
But I guess really that's about all we need to say as far as the setup and what it is and everything like that. So I guess we'll just go ahead and get to your star rating, Donnie. So give your thoughts on the movie and your official star rating.
Yeah, I pretty much laid out my thoughts already, but just a quick summary. I mean, shit. I would say the only thing about it, and this is true even in repeated viewings, I didn't really connect with all of the characters. Like there was some I just didn't get a shit about. Fuck, I'm blanking on their damn character names. But
well, you've got Dr. Herbert West, obviously, and then you've got
the
main other guy is Dan Kane, and then his girlfriend Megan.
Yeah.
So those are your other main ones, and then the doctor that gets his head whacked off.
Dad. Her dad, I just didn't give a shit about.
Yeah, the dean. I think it's Dean Hall.
Yeah, the dean. Yeah. So I just didn't give a shit about him. But I would say that was pretty much the only thing. But I don't know what my highest rating has been. But aside from all of that, this is really just about the complete package. It was a great episode to kind of kick off the Spook Show. But my star rating, I'm going to give 4 stars.
Hard to argue with that. That being said, I'll tell you what we said. Will gave it 4 stars. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that was on a re-rating, in our first anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
I think he actually went up. So he gave it 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars, and Smoke gave it 5 stars. So it is the single highest rated movie of any of us. Was this movie. Right out the gate, Smoke gave it a 5. Now, Smoke, we're not necessarily going down
from there.
We're not necessarily going down the road of like me and Smoke and I and Will re-rating anything. But if you necessarily would re-rate it, would you still leave it at a 5, or would you lower it, Smoke?
I'd probably still keep it as a 5. I mean, for me, and I talked about this before, and it's not necessarily that I kind of back off on giving 5s too much. But I mean, I haven't given, none of us have given a 5 to anything else.
No.
This is the only one that's gotten a 5, and I gave it to it. But it's still one of those for me that's just, I could watch it over and over and over again and never get tired of it. And it doesn't have to do with the technical aspect, even though I think for the budget that this movie had, technically speaking, it was fucking great. I mean, if they had more money, the other things would be probably different. It also might not make it the movie that it is right now either. So, when it comes to 5, it's a very personal type of thing. But either it's going to be a movie that I really love and the story is great and the cinematography and everything is perfect, or it's going to be a movie that personally resonates for me, regardless of technical aspects or whatever. And so this one kind of falls in that category. It's it's not the best movie ever made. People would argue whether it would deserve a full perfect rating or not, but again, it's one of those movies that resonates highly for me as a horror film from the beginning when I saw it up to now. So there's some movies that maybe I would have given a 5-star rating, say 20 years ago, that maybe today I wouldn't give quite so high a rating. But this is one of those that just kind of, it just sticks. Jaws even. I didn't even give Jaws a 5. We all gave it probably, that might be one of the other highest rated movies collectively that we rated.
I think collectively it is the highest. I'm looking at it now, and that's without Donny giving his rating yet. We'll get to that eventually, but because that was episode 35, so it's going to be a while before we get there. But we all gave that one 4 3/4 stars. So that's about as perfect as you're going to fucking get on our scale. Any movie we've done.
I gave Reanimator a 5.
Yeah.
And that's probably where I would stick with that. I probably would still stick with it, even though I know that Jaws is a much better made movie, technically speaking.
Yes.
What do I get out of it the most enjoyment of it? I mean, and we're splitting hairs when you come to 5 and 4 3/4 stars versus 5 stars.
Yeah, I think you get over that 4 1/4, 4 1/4, 4 1/2 territory. Now you're splitting hairs.
Yeah.
These are great movies. At least in our opinions. That being said, Donnie, you asked what was the highest one you rated. The highest one you rated was 4 1/4 stars for Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah. That's warranted, absolutely.
Yeah, but Will's not here to give an official kill count. Maybe we can get that from him at some point. Just so we can have one on the books. So since he's not here, we'll just go ahead and jump to your segment, Donnie.
Connections from the crypt.
See what the old crypt keeper has to laugh about here with the Reanimator.
I know. Yeah, but no. So this being a Spook Show Rewind, this is almost kind of like a reverse, reverse order or whatever. But typically, what we do with Crypt Connections, we connect the current movie episode by any cast or crew connections to past Spook Show episodes, but with Reanimator being the very first, we kind of look forward.
Back to the future.
Say what?
We're going back to the future.
That is exactly right. But no. So on the cast side, the only connection Reanimator has for cast is Barbara Crampton was in Chopping Mall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, and then on the crew side, we had some couple of special effects, makeup effects folks, Critters, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Trick or Treat, and Smoke's favorite, the Ginger Dead Man. Believe it or not, all have ties to crew from Reanimator.
I can believe that just for the comedy horror aspect of it. You know, I can believe that maybe there was a few people involved in both, no doubt. Well, that's interesting. Like I said, so we don't have the official kill count. We'll skip that, but Smoke, I'll toss to you.
Gore Score.
Oh yeah. So this one, you know, as you had mentioned earlier in this episode about Chaz Balin, the late great Chaz Balin, who, of course, the Gore Score is named after. He definitely did Reanimator in his, in the Gore Score book that he has, as well as the Jeep Red Horror Handbook. Not only that, I'll give his rating for the movie too, and because I think it's kind of relevant. And but first, I'll start with the Gore Score. He gave it a perfect 10. I think I'm going to keep it that way. It's you know, you can get plenty of movies gorier than Reanimator, but I think it's a sustained level. Like throughout the whole movie, from beginning to end, there's not much of this movie that goes by without there being a splatter scene somewhere in there, pretty, you know, within a few minutes. And it's all like good-natured. Well, for the most part. Actually, there's one thing I wanted to talk about that I don't think we talked about when we first originally did this episode, but most of the gore in this movie is of that fun splatter variety. You know, it's not necessarily mean-spirited or anything, but there was one scene that Stuart Gordon himself actually trimmed, even though there was an uncut version of the movie and there was an R-rated version. Even in the uncut movie, he didn't go all out with the way they shot it, but it was the autopsy scene. Remember that scene in the school? There's you know, when they're peeling back the head and cracking the bones and all that stuff. That was like too much for him. He said even like it went at a 180-degree turn from the rest of the gore in the movie, because the rest of the gore in the movie is really kind of, you know, it's fun. Like I mentioned, it's fun, you know, splattery, it's humorous, like the decapitation and all the stuff that's going on. Like you can enjoy it on that level. But that was a bit too real for him, and it got a little bit depressing when they were showing the whole untrimmed autopsy scene. So he kind of cut back on that a little bit.
Kind of kills the comedy mood.
Yeah, definitely puts it in a different type of category. Puts it in Faces of Death / Cannibal Holocaust type category.
Yeah.
Something like that, where you got more realistic type messed up gore scene going on. But yeah, he even though it's still in there and it's still pretty effective, what he did leave in there, I guess there was more that got trimmed and left on the cutting room floor that never got put back in from that autopsy scene. But yeah, he gave it a 10. I'm going to stick with the 10. And he rated it down. His actual movie rating score was from he used skull ratings, and the highest would be 4 skulls, but the lowest rating would be he'd go down to half a skull, but beyond that, the even lower was a dog. You call it the Bow Wow. Yes. But Reanimator, he gave it 4. He gave it a perfect score as well. So, and I know that was, you know, one of his, if not his favorite. I think Texas Chainsaw was his favorite movie of all time, and I believe Reanimator might have been his number 2. His last little, I'm not going to read his whole description of it because it's basically just kind of recapping, you know, things that we talked about. But the last sentence he had in here, you know, says contains the infamous head sequence, and everybody knows what that sequence is. Not necessarily the doctor's head sequence, but the head. It is, yeah, that. Not the decapitation sequence, but the head-given head sequence.
Yeah.
And then it says, and enough splattering to satisfy even the most jaded gorehound. A personal favorite. See it again now. So, and I echo those sentiments. If you've seen it before, see it again now. If you've never seen this movie, what the hell are you doing? Turn this off and go watch it.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor. But yeah, so I'm going to stick with Chaz's 10 for this one too. And I guess, I don't know if is that the highest we've had as far as the Gore Score rating?
I don't have all of them in front of me, but yeah, if that's not the highest, it's got to be one of the highest. I mean, obviously 10, you can't really go any higher. So yeah, it's at least tied. But like, from what I can see here, I don't see one All I see is like 8s, and I think maybe you might have given Terrifier a 10, but I don't have that one in front of me right this minute.
Yeah, and the thing about Terrifier is it's got that one that one scene that's like the most over the top part.
Yeah.
And then it's got some other ones spread out, but really, this is the other thing too I was going to do about as far as dissecting my gore score or whatever is sustained gore throughout. Like if it's a movie doesn't go more than maybe 5 or 10 minutes without there being some sort of splattery set piece, and if it can contain that from the beginning to the end, then I'm just going to get a higher rating than say something that has what you might call a set piece. It's like this is the money shot of the splatter movie, and then everything else is just kind of leading up to that. Then that won't get as high, even if it's like way more disturbing than anything that would be in Reanimator. If it's not sustained throughout the whole thing, then I kind of back down a little bit on it.
I'd say if you did give it a 10, which I think you did, let's just say you did for a second, to compare these two with 10s are two different kinds of 10s, in my opinion. Like, one's way more mean-spirited, so to speak, than the other, and like you said, more sustained, grisly gore in Terrifier than there is in this.
I may come up with a different rating that has like because it's kind of hard whenever you're talking about movies made in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Or there's a different. I mean, it gets more realistic as we get into the modern age when it comes to the makeup effects, to the actual practical effects, the blood coloring and the grue and everything's just more realistic. And so I think I'm going to come up with it'll be 10 or whatever. But if it's something that goes above and beyond that, I might just put a 10 plus or something like that. Something to know that this is, yes, this movie is a 10. But this movie's got even more, over the top or whatever, so it needs to have something to differentiate. And we haven't really got to those movies except maybe Terrifier.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll eventually probably get to some. Like I said, we keep mentioning it in various episodes, but the cannibal movies, Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox. Once you get to those, there's way more stuff going on in there that's just fucked up. Not just the human gore, but there's other, there's stuff going on there. If we ever get to those on the show.
Yeah.
You'll see me. Those require, and some other ones too, if we get some other newer ones as well, would require some other kind of rating, because you can't put Cannibal Holocaust against Reanimator and say, okay, this is 10 and that's 10 and they're the same experience. No, they're definitely different as far as and it has to do with that mean-spirited factor, sort of things that happen that are gory but go above and beyond the fun aspects of splatter and go into something that makes you want to take a shower after you watch it.
Yeah. And Terrifier was definitely one of those. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So I might go back and revamp that and just put, like I said, maybe it'll be the plus, maybe 10 plus. That way, it's kind of like the triple X of splatter movies.
Yeah. Especially
10 plus rating will be the triple X of,
Yeah. One more thing, before we close up shop, I'll add that there were 2 more Reanimator movies that came out after this. 5 years later, in 1990, there was Bride of Reanimator, and then in 2003 there was Beyond Reanimator, and I think there has been talk of possibly making another one, with Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West again. There's always been rumblings of that going back and forth, and there have been remakes and slightly different versions. Like there was an Italian version called Herbert West Reanimator in 2017. And stuff like that. And the comic books, there's other adaptations, but you get the point. So, the point is I'm sure we will get to Bride of Reanimator and Beyond Reanimator and maybe even Herbert West Reanimator one of these days. But, bottom line is, look, all of our ratings reflect it, all these critic ratings and everything that we just went through reflect it. This is a horror classic. You don't run into too many like this. I'm glad that we were able to, start the Spookshow Rewind off with this one, just like when we started the entire podcast off with this one. Like Donny, you mentioned it was a great way to start the show, and it was kind of a deep into the pool kind of movie to start off with. We swung for the fences on the first movie. Yeah, we did. I mean, we went straight for one of the favorites, so. But it's cool to go back and revisit it, and this will be something that we dive in and out of here with these Spookshow Rewind episodes every once in a while. So I'm guessing the next time that we do this, we'll be talking about what we talked about in episode 2, Trick or Treat from 2007. So whenever we get around to that here on the Spook Show Rewind series, I'm sure that will be in the next month or so. We'll get to that and see what Donnie's thoughts are on that, and get to revisit that one a little bit, because I haven't watched that one since we did that episode. So that will be pretty cool to talk about that one again. That was one that we all enjoyed as well. So like I said off the top, don't forget that next week we will be talking episode 91, and that is Malignant from 2021. So we're actually going to be here toward the beginning of 2022. We're going to be going back to 2021 briefly and finally get around to watching Malignant. So that will be what's up next week, next Monday at 6 p.m. East. So for Will, who was on assignment, for the back half of for Will that was on assignment in this episode and couldn't be with us, and for Donnie and the Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are the All-American Spook Show Horror Podcast, and we will talk to you next week.
Please replace the speaker on its rack when you're ready to leave. Failure to do so will damage both the speaker and your car. We'll be grateful, and so will the patrons who follow you.